Okay. So this is at a kind of a different level of granularity. It's about it's work that is in progress, designing a platform for analytics for ebooks, and more specific in the context of a European project, the Mathematical Creativity Square project, that I'll say more about. It's work with colleagues from the Knowledge Lab and from Potsdam University, Oliver Labs and Sokratis, Karkalas from the Knowledge Lab. I'm Manolis, Mavrikis. And I'll present first a little bit the context of the work before going into presenting the sort of the solution and the platform we have designed. The context is these ebooks that are exploratory, that contain exploratory widgets. So I first need to explain a little bit what are these exploratory widgets, because they're not necessarily commonly used. They're basically highly interactive learning environments that could be used on their own, but they're plugged within a larger context of an ebook. So these environments could be as complex as a programming language like Logo. Here, this is a 3D Logo environment that contains some code for the students to experiment with, some slides to play with different variables and to understand some mathematical contexts. Other widgets are this expressor environment, where students are building patterns and try to understand different rules that pertain them. And there's a talk actually in this room at later 3A3 that describes analytics specifically for this environment. So these kind of tools are very open and interactive. They're not structured answers. They don't expect from the students to provide like structured answers or just one answer. Another example that maybe more of you are familiar with is this GeoGebra environment for building geometry models and helping students understand geometric concepts. So going beyond just looking at these specific widgets out of context, in the Mathematical Creativity Square project, what we are doing is integrating those in larger ebooks that the project is calling C-books, from creative or from constructive. So these ebooks look like this, where there is a widget embedded in a page, and within the page there are some other widgets that accompany the key widget that the student is interacting with, and they're asking the student to understand some concept, undertake some questions, maybe also add text boxes or other elements that accompany the widget to help the students kind of reflect or to answer even structured questions. This usually an ebook has several pages. This one has 3, and it contains every page can contain none or several widgets. Usually no more than 2. So what are we trying to do? On one hand, and this is not in this talk, we're trying to encourage and support teachers, help students use these ebooks. But here we're focusing more in what we refer to as informed redesign of these ebooks. So as the books are being used by students, we want to support the designer, an educational learning designer, or even a teacher eventually, to be able to redesign them based on evidence from the use of the books, rather than just their intuition. So that links well with the cycle that Ken was presenting yesterday. I don't know if you were in the keynote at last, and you may remember this diagram that Ken was referring to as data-driven iterative engineering, whereby we use, apart from intuition and a model of expertise, we can also use we can derive insights from data. So before seeing Ken's talk, we were kind of referring to this as revisiting the design cycle. There's some work from Diana Lorillard in the learning design context, where this is a normal kind of cycle of design and redesign, where you would reflect on some current practice, create, adapt, and edit some resource, in our case, a C-book, use it with students, analyze and reflect, redesign, and so on. But our main concern is to be able to analyze and reflect using data from these C-books. So in the project, what our engagement is actually to design this platform that would enable this redesign. So we worked with several partners across the project. As I mentioned, it's a European project, and elicited various requirements. I won't go into all of them in this context into very detail, but at a very high level, from a usability point of view, would like to support analysis at different levels of granularity, like being able to look both at pages but also within the widgets, or also within particular users and what they're doing. Retrieve, process, and analyze data on selected and flexible time periods, because a particular issue with C-books is how they're used. Like other e-books that are beginning to emerge in the use in classrooms and so on, these books are envisioned to be used in different settings, including blended learning or more kind of open-ended way of using them. So that becomes challenging from a technical point of view, because you could have data kind of distributed over long periods. And actually one of the reviewers was equating this with kind of MOOC data. I can see the point. So that was a particular, and still is a particular issue we're trying to address. And generally, again, from a user point of view, we're trying to support a kind of exploratory data analysis, basically giving access to visualizations and to data to help the users, the designers in this case, generate insight from the data. From a more technical point of view, again, I won't go into all of these. They're described in the paper. We want the ability to use the service anytime, anywhere, to allow access to these designers, deal with this large data I mentioned. And because on the sideline we have this vision of also enabling teachers use this dashboard on real time, there's this extra demand. So to kind of outline the rest of the talk, but also help emphasize some of the key points that are coming, in the design, based on the requirements I just mentioned, we have these following challenges, basically to accommodate these diverse widgets and pages that are throughout the different C-books, allow switching between different levels of specificity. Like, are we talking about a page data? Are we talking about within widget data? And analyze the data on selected time periods. So I won't be able in the short time to go through all the features, but I'll attempt to show a demo how we are addressing this. And as a second strand, towards the end, we talk about our evaluation attempts, on which we actually welcome your feedback as well. So, contrary to popular wisdom, I'm going to try a demo online. And to demonstrate also one of our requirements of this being accessible anywhere, anytime. So if it fails, we'll revert to the snapshots. This is I just loaded a while ago, and I think it's been trying to do something. But this is where we are at the moment with the prototype. One of the aspects to notice is that this loads from within another environment, and it is linked to the particular C book that the author designer is wants to analyze the data for. So when it loads, it automatically uses the structure of the book, and it maps it there on the on this area. So you see the structure of the book, and by accessing the different levels within the book, you get contextual data in relation to the usage of the book. So here we see users per page because we are at the level of the general book. The mouse lets me. We can see actions per page, users per widget, and so on. This is from, and the demo effect. So we are at the level of the whole C book, and with, as I was saying, one of our requirements is being able to switch quickly context, because you may want to explore something. So for example, here you can quickly see that there are less users per in page 3, and you may be interested to understand why. So a sensible thing to do might be to look at page 2 and to see what's happening in the different widgets. So when you switch to page 2, you see the widgets within this page. So here we have again the users, and we can see that 2 of the users students in this case, they didn't interact with one of the widgets, this blue light. But you may want to also explore further the data. We've designed a particular crossed-up visualization that shows the distribution of actions per user for the different widgets, indicating the number of events within the widget, and how the color intensity demonstrates the distribution compared to the average. So if you are green, you are above average. Blue, 80% above average, and red, or a shade of red, just below average. So with that, for example, we can quickly see that two of the users here, they never interacted with this widget, and without delaying us too much, I can show that within the widget then, for example, the one that the students didn't interact, one may want to go to the previous widget to understand what's going on, and then we see widget-specific data. For example, here are all the users, and again, their actions within the widgets. But as we go on, we see even the actions for the specific widget. So there are actions here within this widget: update, remove, insert, and so on. So you can start seeing what's going on. And we designed some specific timelines as well that show the actions over timeline. These last ones are actually under development. I mentioned at the requirements that would like to be able to change time quickly, particularly because of the way these books are used. You may want to focus on a particular time period when this was used in the classroom, or maybe after a classroom session that the students were given the book as a blended learning activity. So one kind of simple and kind of standard nowadays operation is this flashback slider that allows us to go back in time and see the data then. And that modifies the visualization here. I don't know if you noticed there was a slight change. But a more particular configuration that we were asked to enable is how and what data does the dashboard show. One critical aspect is the fact that we can't obviously, it's a web-based application, it communicates with the server and so on. So the challenging bit is what kind of data range do you display? So, and for that, again, we would really value your feedback because we haven't seen other approaches in the area. We had to develop these kind of ad hoc controls that control the time, different time points. You can see the distribution of the events. It's a pop-up, so it's blocked here. And we can go back and forward in time. So that's a good time to go back to my slides here. So I hope you can see that from a technical point of view, there are a few challenges. As I said, this needs to be easy to access. It's designed to be general, and actually we would work on collaborations with other kind of ebooks and so on that rely on XAPI data. And it's web-based, so we had to design this local database that synchronizes with the server based on the time period that is selected. And we have these flashback queries, so that required also kind of efficient caching on the browser side and so on. So, but as I said, I think the point is what we're doing these days, and inspired also by the talk this morning, the cartoon-based slides. Lately, there's this cartoon kind of going viral on where the suggestions here is that you need a dashboard, and we are not trying to impose a dashboard in our designers, but as I mentioned, we're trying to encourage them to reflect on the designs in a way that they don't ignore it. So we're trying to avoid this problem that they do use the dashboard, but so the question is, from our point of view, how do we evaluate that? And again, we're trying to to go beyond just looking on whether the data is accurate, and that we have approaches to do that, like from a technical perspective, on whether they're accurate. So at this phase, which wasn't reported in the paper, we're at this evaluation phase, where we're using a system usability scale to start pinpointing at different usability issues with the system, and also for the specific features, because that's like my particular thing that I'm nagging about. How do I know that a particular feature is worth investing our effort from now on? So we're using this question as we're beginning to get stories from people who are using the dashboard to redesign their books. And on one hand, we see that they are really discovering some things that they wouldn't have expected, that even the teacher might have been adamant about how the book is used or not used, but now they can really see that this is not the case. And we're trying to drill down on the different aspects. I don't have time to go in all of this, but we're asking specific questions on the different visualizations, like the multiple levels that we are able to switch back and forth, that you see it's very welcome. The visualization that shows the widget usage, that is also quite well understood. We have some issues with the timelines, which we're aware of. They need much more work, and they're very complex visualizations that to some extent you need to understand them deeper. And I'm interested also in other people's opinion on this area that has to do with the data range and the display range that I demonstrated briefly, because from a usability perspective, the fact that we are asking a kind of a standard designer to understand the period of time that they want to analyze data, that they have to retrieve it from the database, synchronize their browser, and select a particular period within which they're analyzing it. We know that it's relatively complex from an interaction perspective, and although they understand this quite quickly. So here's the complexity of data display, and the question was, what is the complexity, if you think it's complex? And you can see that they're kind of disagreeing, so that's a positive sign. But in relation to the necessity of doing that as an action, they're disagreeing that it's important. They don't see the need of having to do that because they think I should open the dashboard and get the data that I need, which is quite challenging and complex. So there's some work to be done in that area of how can we make this much more simpler and also help them kind of develop data literacy to help them understand that this is a requirement. So summarizing, you saw the challenges we're addressing, the diverse widgets and the pages, and the fact that there's so many different aspects within a C-book that would like to be able to dig in different levels of granularity, and the analysis of the selected time periods that I highlighted from a usability perspective is interesting. In terms of next steps, we are now demonstrating this informed redesign, what's happening with having given access to people to redesign the books, and scaling up in terms of the architecture we are using and so on is challenging, and something that is not there is the generality of the tools and the design and how we have implemented them. We're interested to find ways to collaborate and to reuse them in different contexts, not only in our particular mathematical creativity square project. And with that, thank you. Any questions?
I'm sorry if I missed it. Were you only looking at widgets and not actual pages that people read, annotate, or highlight?
Yeah. One thing is that a page is also a widget in our terminology. So within the pages, especially the text boxes and so on, these interactive elements are widgets.
Did you track highlights or annotations that you
No. So that we're not looking at that, but it's an interesting. I think I've seen some work that they're doing that, so might be interesting to integrate. The reality is that these pages are not they're not the traditional page of an ebook that has a lot of text. They're mostly an interactive element that you are asked to engage with. So that's the interest in the project. Okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, I maybe asked a stupid question here. About it's related to the last one. You talked about engagement with certain widgets, and if there's no engagement or low engagement, you said you looked at the page before, the set of widgets before. Just that.
Yeah. Well, this was a.
What do you? Can you drill down on that? I didn't quite
Yeah. So the question is why, if I'm noticing that one widget is not being used, why am I looking at the previous page? And this is a particular case of this book. Basically, it's designed. It has 3 pages, and within every page it has two widgets. And the idea is that one is a kind of an introductory widget, and the other is an activity widget. So if I'm not noticing something in the first widget of the second page, I'm interested on the previous one to see if the students got stuck with it or why would this happen. And in this expected time period where other students were working with it, why are these 2 particular students not?
Sequential linking.
Yeah.
It's a breakdown of
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. One thing that is interesting to do as future work here is to be able to pick up some patterns in the dashboard and make suggestions to the designer to look at these specific areas, because we're starting to expect too much from them to analyze the whole
So
interaction.
breakdowns throughout the book, I guess.
Yeah.
Sequences, yeah.
I
Yeah.
noticed a reference to XAPI there. Your dashboard has been designed to be portable in the sense that it can be bound to another e-reader.
Yes. Yeah. So again, the question was how portable is the dashboard and if it can be bound to other readers.
And how do we get access to that?
Sorry?
And how do we get access to it?
You talk to Sokratis. But in general, the point is how would you design the other e-reader to send data to our database? But it's all possible in the realm of development.
It's a quick question, just a practical one. You said it's all online,
Mm-hmm.
the interaction, and schools, at least in Italy, are asking developers to come back to synchronization if they are using tablets because of network overload. So in the design of this kind of collection of exercises, is it possible to use them in a classroom that has not a huge bandwidth and then synchronize the tracking data?
Well, in principle, it's possible. We haven't done that in our case. The assumption with that's why I don't call them e-books. The assumption with this particular context where we are working, these e-books, are that you need to be always online because you go from a page to the next page and it needs to load it. But that's the technology we're hooking in with. I've seen work that generally this is possible. Also in our context, if the network is lost for a while or it requires, or it's overloaded, it's designed to collect a lot of data for a period and send them all together. So again, this is something to address this issue. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, and synchronization is incremental. So if you ask for some data, it checks whether this data is available locally, and it downloads only the missing parts. So that saves some bandwidth.
Okay, so that would, we don't have time for more questions. If you have, just continue to the coffee break. Thank you once again.